All right, so from a catalog perspective, let's start there. So what I did want to have a bit of a chat about from a catalog perspective was going through some of the little tips and tricks that I've kind of that simPRO have in relation to the catalogs. So I've got a couple of catalog items that I particularly want to pick on. So where I want to start is I'm going to go through this cable per meter that I've got set up in my system. And I'm going to go through, the first thing that I want to have a bit of a chat about is how we can set it up to be able to order a roll of cable, for example, but sell a single unit of cable. Because that's one thing that people struggle a little bit with. When you get your supplier stuff all sent through, the suppliers will sometimes send through the catalog items in just the full roll price. So that makes it a little bit tricky when you're quoting or you're trying to sell it, because it's, you know, essentially at a 100 meter roll price, for example. So what I've got set up in here is I've essentially got set up the trade price per meter of cable. So if your catalog is in here and it has, say, $42, essentially, if it's going to be a roll of 100, we want to try and prorata that price down, essentially just divide it by 100, and we want to sneak in here the trade price at 42 cents. The next little thing that I'm going to do is tell simPRO that we need to buy in quantities of 100 meters. So the minimum pack quantity is a really great way to get that set up in there to order it in multiples of something. So this example, we're going to order it in multiples of 100. The name of the item, I've renamed this just a cable per meter. So whatever you want to rename it to, that's obviously going to be your name of it. One thing just to bear in mind that if you are selling it or you are quoting it and you are itemizing your invoices, the customer will actually see this name if you are itemizing it. So you'll make sure it's called something appropriate. So I guess to kind of round this off, so we've got the per meter price and we've got the cable per meter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my supplier tab. Now, the trick in here is we've got the supplier description as well as the supply quantity. So the supply quantity in here being 100. So that's basically saying to simPRO, what equals 1? So in this example, we're basically saying 100 meters equals 1. So when I am raising the purchase order to the supplier, they're not going to see that I'm ordering 100 meters. They're going to see that I'm ordering one roll of cable, because we've set up the minimum pack quantity in 100 and we've said the supply quantity is 100 as well. So that's going to equal 1. The supply description is what the supplier is going to see on the purchase order. So they're going to see that you're ordering a roll of cable rather than the per meter, which is set up in the name of the item. So that way you can set it up to sell it in a particular way, but in the supplier tab, we're then able to order it in a particular way. If you haven't done so already, or you weren't aware of this, you can add multiple suppliers to a single item. So in this example, I've got C&W and Lawrence & Hanson, both being a single supplier for this, well, both for being multiple suppliers for this one single part. You can have different supplier part numbers on here as well. So I've got in here that when I'm ordering it from C&W, I'm just ordering 2.5 mil TPS. From Lawrence & Hanson, if I was to send a PO out to them, it's going to see ABC 2.5 TPS. So from that perspective, I'm able to itemize exactly what I want to show the supplier when I'm giving it to them. One other thing, a couple of other things that I want to show from a catalog perspective, the search terms. I know this isn't necessarily ordering specific, but it can actually make it a little bit easier to find the items when you're trying to order it or sell it. The search terms in here are just custom search terms that you can put towards it. So you can essentially put a comma and type in really whatever you want. So it's a really nice way to have, if you've got multiple people using simPRO and each one of them want to have their own favorites folder, essentially you can't do that, but I could type in here Adam's favorite. So if I was to search Adam's fave, then it will actually show up any items that I've put a custom search term towards. From a linked items perspective, you can actually link multiple items to this one particular product. So I'm just going to open up another item that I've got in here, which is my, my GPO. So from a PowerPoint perspective, every time that I buy or sell this PowerPoint, I want simPRO to prompt me that I'm also going to need a plaster bracket as well. So if you start linking items to particular catalog items, regardless if you're buying or selling these items, simPRO's got a prompt to say, you've got linked items. Do you also want to be able to sell those or buy those as well? So it's a nice little prompt that if you always need to sell something in a pair of items, you are able to just be prompted just in case you forget to order it or in case you forget to sell it as well. The last little tip I'm going to give from a cataloging perspective is the history tab. So in this history tab, this is going to show everywhere that that particular product has been bought or sold. This especially came in handy for me in a past life when I was working at Energy Australia. We actually had a recall on some DC isolators that we used to sell when we were doing solar installs. When we had the recall, they said any products between this period of time and this period of time were being recalled. We were able to then use this history tab to then filter through to see any products that we sold in a particular period of time. So I can say, show me anything that we sold last month or that we purchased last month. And it will then just show any movements that have been happening for that particular product within that period of time. So if that ever does come up, the history tab is going to save you a lot of time, not having to go back through jobs to figure out when you actually sold that product, or you actually bought that product, to then get the recall sorted out through your different wholesalers. Cool. So from that perspective, yep, I do recommend probably taking a little bit of time to try and get your catalog in order, because once your catalog's in order, it's going to make your buying or selling a whole lot easier. Cool. So the next thing that I kind of want to have a bit of a chat about is how simPRO actually handles the products that are in the system. So for those that aren't aware, simPRO works by a FIFO method from a stock perspective, which is essentially first in, first out. So a lot of people that kind of come to simPRO might come from the likes of MyOb or Xero or any other kind of inventory management systems. Some of them work by like an average cost. simPRO doesn't work by an average cost. simPRO works by first in, first out. So essentially what that means is if I buy 5 PowerPoints for $5, then I buy another 5 PowerPoints for $10, the first 5 PowerPoints that I assign to jobs are going to be at the price point of $5. The next 5 PowerPoints that I then assign to jobs inside of simPRO will then be assigned at a $10 value. So the reason why I'm bringing that up specifically is to have a chat about managing or buying items specifically for project jobs. So one thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't set up stock locations for big projects. Now, this can be especially handy if you need to buy a whole bunch of stock at the start of the project that you want to kind of stash away, that you don't want to be a direct cost to the job, because you might be progress claiming based on stock that you've assigned to the job, not based on what you have actually purchased, because you might not actually be using that for a little bit yet. So what some people do is they will actually, so I'm trying to get my chat up. For some reason, the chat's not coming up. I may be looking at the wrong spot. Let's find the chat. I'm not quite sure where the chat's hidden away. So from that perspective, you can set up, say, storage containers for particular projects. You can set up a whole bunch of different things. So when you are buying the stock, and you would then want to assign it to jobs later on, you can buy that stock to go into a particular stock location for that particular project. And I'm going to go through buying stock for different stock locations when we actually get into the whole catalog purchasing process. So if you ever need to and you want to create a stock location for a job, do it, buy the stock and dump it in there, and then you can start assigning the stock to the job as you're using it. Because simPRO does work by the first in, first out method, or the FIFO method, you're going to ensure that any stock that you purchase for that stock location is going to be assigned to the job at the correct project price, not at just your standard mixed up stock that's just sitting in the system that you don't know what stock value is being assigned to the job. At least if you set the stock location up and you start assigning from there, you are guaranteed that you are assigning stock at a particular stock value. Cool. So let's now get into the actual catalog orders process. And let's go through some tips that I've got from Catalogue Orders. So one of the things that I mentioned in my last webinar that I held for project management was the ability to be able to do stock, or to be able to raise a single catalog order for multiple jobs at once, or multiple jobs and different stock locations at once. And not a lot of people actually knew that you could do that. So I'm going to go through that process now in terms of how you can actually do a catalog order for multiple jobs at once, or multiple cost centers inside of a job, or multiple cost centers and jobs and stock at the same time. So essentially what I want to do is I want to just pick my stock location first of all. So I've got my warranty returns as my default storage device, which probably shouldn't be the case. I'm going to just flick that to my warehouse for a moment. So when I am creating a purchase order, simPRO wants to know, first of all, where are we assigning that stock to? Are we assigning it to stock, or are we actually going towards a job? So what I'm going to do in this instance, I'm going to just say a job, first of all, which will then take this box and let me start typing in stuff in there. So I've got a job that I'm going to start using that I've written down before. So I'm going to use job number 89506. The reason I'm picking this job is because this is a project job that I've got it set up in the system, and I've got a whole bunch of different cost centers towards that job. So when I'm doing that and I've typed in the job number, simPRO is going to say what cost center are we assigning the stock to. So I'm just going to start with this particular cost center here. So my civil domestic cold water, that's where I want to start my first bit of ordering going to. So when I click on that, simPRO is going to put in the job number dash cost center number, which is fine. Most people know about that already, and that's great. So if I jump into my catalog and I start adding stock to that particular job, so I'm just going to go to my training, and I might say, look, let's say grab 100 of those plaster brackets. Back to my order tab, what that's going to show me is my current order for the items in this catalog is going to be for my enabling works for civil domestic cold water. Now let's say I want to order some more plaster brackets, but I want to order it for a different component of that job. I can click back in my, my job number area, delete out the cost center number, and then pick a completely different part of that job. So I might say, this is now going to go to hot and cold roughings. I can double back to my catalog tab, add some more of those items. Now back in my order tab, what you're going to see is you're going to see this purchase order's now been split up into two key areas. It's been split up for my civil domestic cold water and also my hot and cold roughings. So what's going to happen, that cost for those products are going to be split between two different cost centers, which is great. That's exactly what I want it to do. So now let's say, just for the sake of this exercise, I want to put it some more to a completely different job. So I'm going to now chuck it to this job here. So I'm going to go at job 88239. Back to my catalog tab, grab some more of that stock. And as you can see, as I continue going, I've now got one single purchase order split up between three different areas. I've got some going to this job, some going to this cost center within that job, some going to that cost center within that job. What you can also do then is you can also then flick it back to stock. Now, what I'm going to do next depends on what storage device is selected up here at the start. So this is going to the warehouse. So I could double back to my catalog, again, add some more in, and we're going to now find that this is now split up in 4 components. It's going to be split up between stock, job 1, job 2 with a cost center, and job 2 for a different cost center. When the supplier gets this particular order, they're not going to see that this is split up between all these different stock locations. All they're going to see is that I'm ordering 400 plaster brackets. So it's a really handy way to be able to create a single purchase order split up against multiple jobs or multiple stock locations in the one single process. So like I said, it's something that you've been able to do the whole way through. It's not something that simPRO generally tends to show an awful lot that it allows you to do this, but it is a process that you can actually go through and try and reduce costs on freight, especially because you're getting it delivered all at once. And simPRO is going to grab that cost and then divvy it up between whatever areas of the job that I'm asking it to go to. So is that something that everyone knew that you could actually do? Or is this something that's kind of that you weren't aware that you could actually do it? I'm happy for you to throw a chat in there if you want to have a bit of a chat as well. But yeah, that's a really handy process. The next thing, talking about doing these purchase orders, is setting up your scripts to be slightly more efficient, so that way you don't have to continuously type things out. So I've got a script set up for pickup, as well as a script that by default is by the office. So if you are going to pick the items up, drop in the pickup script. I've got mine set up to say goods will be picked up by XX, which I can then delete out, and I can then say by Adam. So the scripts are really good. It'll save you a lot of time if you're continuously typing the same thing over and over and over again. The private notes don't go on the purchase order. They're just for you. So if you want to leave a little note in there about anything that you want to reference, by all means, go for it. Up here where you've got the reference, this reference area, again, is another place that people generally tend to overlook. I find that really handy to be able to just do a really quick note about what this purchase order is about. So I might say this multiple, a multi-order for jobs / stock, and you'll see where that goes when we actually save this purchase order. If you're not using it, and obviously pop in a due date to say when you actually want to buy. So there's some different tricks that I'll give you in relation to the catalogs. One other thing that you can do, I'm just going to remove all those items out for the moment, is I'm going to show you what the cheapest order, how that cheapest order works. So I'm going to add in a GPO and one cable. You'll see when I do that, we're going to get that linked item saying, do you also want to buy the linked item? So I'll say, yes, I do, because I'm buying that GPO. So I'm going to say, I also want to order a box of those. Now, back in this purchase order tab, one of the things that I did want to show you, if you've never noticed it, is this whole show cheapest supplier, show cheapest order business. So what this cheapest supplier, cheapest orders actually designed to do is it's designed to then let simPRO filter out what you're buying based on, is it going to be cheapest for you to have one single purchase order, or do you want simPRO just to have a look to see who's the cheapest supplier for all these different products? So as I go show cheapest supplier, it's then going to flick all that through to say Lawrence and Hanson is the cheapest supplier, because it's going to try and group them all together under one supplier. So again, trying to save on freight and shipping costs. However, if I say show cheapest order, it doesn't really care who the supplier is. It's going to say, well, it's cheapest to buy the cable from C&W because you can get it for 38 cents. So you're going to be raising two purchase orders in this instance, not one. Whereas if I go to show cheapest supplier, even though Lawrence and Hanson are more expensive, it wants to say to buy everything through one supplier, use this guy. So you might save on freight. But if you don't care about who the cheapest supplier is, you just care about the cheapest order, we're going to use this guy to then show us who the cheapest supplier is for these products. So once I go finish, that's obviously going to give me two different purchase orders to send out to two different suppliers. So let's do that now. So we've got two different POs now. So we've got 16199 and 16200. So this is where we'd obviously go into each purchase order and then email them out to each supplier accordingly. So pretty handy to know about those little features. Now, in sticking with the theme of catalog orders, I have created a job, and I want to show you a little button within a job. Again, not a lot of people know about. So I'm going to open this job up over here. I'm going to explain what I'm going to go through in here. So in my parts and labor tab, if I just hit this little box to reset it back to the default for a moment, we're going to see when I add this purchase order in, when I add this catalog item into the job, simPRO knows that the default buy price for that catalog order, for that catalog item is 15 bucks. I don't want to buy it at 15 bucks. I might have called my wholesaler. They might have a special and I can actually order it for 10 bucks. So I want to mark up off $10. Or, I mean, this is probably a process that would happen more at the quoting stage. So when you're putting your quote together, you're going through and typing in all the catalog prices rather than at the job stage, but I'm going to use this as the example. Now, when I go to my stock tab and I go to my purchase order and I want to create one, most people know about this stocks to required business. That's great. So we're basically saying we're going to order for anything that's still required. So in my required tab, I can see I need one of them. I do have a whole bunch in stock, but I'm going to ignore that for a moment. I want to order anything that's been allowed for on this job. What I want to talk about here specifically is this purchase prices. So we've got purchase prices based on the supplier or based on the job. What this means, if I was to leave this as based on supplier, which is what simPRO leaves by default. So this is where you need to be quite careful. By default, when you go into this tab, it's always based on supplier. Even though in my parts and labor tab, I said I'm buying it for 10 bucks. In my stock tab, when I go to create a purchase order, if I leave that based on supplier, you'll notice when I create that purchase order, it's going to create it at 15 bucks because that's the default price of the part based on my catalog, which is sitting right there at 15 bucks. I'm going to cancel that for a moment and I'm going to change the radio dial now to based on the job. So being based on the job, because I've overridden the buy price of that item at 10 bucks, what simPRO is now going to do is it's now going to say, where'd it go? I mustn't have that radio dial. Forgot to go stocks are required. Okay, so let's go based on job again. So that now, in theory, should be raising the purchase order for the price of $10 because that's what I overrode in the job. Yeah. So one of the things that's really good to get into the habit of is when you are raising a purchase order based on anything that's been allowed for within the job, if you are doing stocks to required, get into the habit of basing it on the job. If you haven't overridden it and it's just left at your standard catalog price, it's fine. It'll just buy it at the catalog price because that's what the job said. However, if there are any parts in here that you have overridden, it is a good habit to get into to make sure that you are changing that radio dial to say based on job. So you are buying the items at the prices that you've actually said that you were quoted for or the prices that you've allowed inside of simPRO. So that's just a little tip that I wanted to give everyone in relation to based on job when it comes to the catalog orders. The next little tip I'm going to give is the item entry order. Now, the item entry order has the tip I'm going to give you is quite niche. So it may not relate to everyone, but it does relate to quite a few people, especially in the HVAC world or in the world of projects. As we all know, simPRO is a quantity-based purchasing system. It's not a dollar-based purchasing system. So what simPRO wants you to do is it wants you to buy an item and then receipt that item in. It doesn't like you saying, well, I'm going to release a purchase order to a supplier for 150 grand. I don't want to itemize everything. I just want to give them a PO for 150 grand. And they're going to just invoice me as those items appear. And I just want to draw down on that purchase order. Yeah. Very similar to how you can draw down on supplier work orders, where you've released out a total value to them and you're just going to continuously draw down on it. This little trick I've picked up is going to help you draw down on purchase orders if you've got a full set value in there. So I'm just going to put in the part number being a full stop, because that's usually, you need to have something in there. So a full stop usually works. I might just say as per quote number 1234. I do obviously need to assign it to a job. So I'm going to just grab a job. I'm just going to say it's job 89506. And I'm just going to pop that towards one of my cost centers. And I'm going to say who the supplier is. So I'm going to say the supplier might be Samuels. All right, this is the trick. So what we want to do is we want to flip this around. We don't want a quantity of 1 at 150,000 because that's going to basically say we need to draw down of 1 unit at 150 grand. That's not going to work. What I want to do is I want to say it's 150 grand and the price is $1. So we're still going to get the same result in terms of what's going to be displayed to the wholesaler because it's just going to be as per quote number 1234. However, and all the other bits and bobs still come into play, your reference, your due date and supplier notes and all the other fun stuff. What this is going to allow us to do, however, when I go finish, if I'm receipting this item, so I'm going to go back to my pending orders. I can see there's just $150,000 purchase order. When I go options and I create a receipt, what that's going to let me do is that's then going to let me say, well, the supplier's invoiced me for $16,892. So that's the invoice quantity at the unit price being $1. So that then allows me now to draw down on that 150 grand. So we're obviously going to put in an invoice number and the invoice date and all the other fun stuff. When we go finish, I can now see in my table that I've now done a partial receipt for the $150,000 purchase order. So there's my balance pending of 133. So if you are in that project world and you do want to be able to start drawing down on your POs, that's a really, really handy way to be able to do it. So therefore you can continuously just draw down as the project goes. So the project would still have a committed cost of 150 grand with an actual cost of 18,000 or whatever it was, with the 130,000 still left to go. So really, really handy. In relation to this, seeing as we're kind of looking at this table, I did mention at the start of the webinar, modifying the table to suit exactly what you're after. Now, I can see this reference in here. It says that multi-order for jobs in stock. That's what I overrode before. When I was saying it's a really good idea to override that reference, it's to give you some clarity in here. Because I mean, if you're searching for a specific order for a specific job, simPRO is going to just tell you what job it's assigned to anyway. It's going to tell you that it's assigned to job 89506, which is sitting in just in this assigned to column. There's really no need for the reference to be the exact same as that, which is in this instance down here. It says job 89506. That says 89506 as well. So when you're creating the purchase order, typing something in that reference field is going to be a really nice, easy way for you to be able to identify what that purchase order was for, especially if it is for a project, because you can then get a whole bunch of different purchase orders in there for different cost centers, unless you know what the cost center number directly refers to. So I clicked on that by accident. Unless you know specifically what it refers to, it's going to be hard to identify what purchase orders are for what cost centers. So using that reference field just for the cost center name at minimum is a really nice way for you to let you know what it's actually for. Now, when you want to rejig this whole area in here, one of the things that you want to do, making sure that you have permission to do so, is use this modified table view button right in the middle of the screen. What that lets you do is turn things on and off. So, I mean, if you don't really care about what it's assigned to or the reference or date ordered, or you want to turn things on and off, by all means, jump in here and turn them on and off. So that way you actually know what they're for. So if I turn on the order type, actually, you know what I might do? I might move that, the assigned to next to the reference field. So that way I can have the job number next to my reference. I might want to also say what type of order was it. So as I hit save and finish, that then is going to add a new field in there so I can see that it's a catalog order, or it would be a description order, whatever it may be. and it's going to be for assigned to over here, and that then is going to have the reference field there as well. So if you do have a process where you are going through the stages and the approval processes, so if I go to my catalog order and you say everything's pending until it's been approved by someone, and you've actually set that at pending, at least with that on, you'd be able to see in that stage that these are pending purchase orders and they wouldn't have been sent out yet. So get the stage on if you are going through that approval process. Make sure your columns are all in some kind of logical sequence, and modify those tables and suit them towards your business needs. One thing you just need to be careful of with the whole modify table view, it is a global setting inside of simPRO. So as you are changing it, it will change for everyone. It's not just being changed for you. So you probably don't want to go changing it too much if other people are going to be involved in this process. You probably want to maybe get together, decide what's important to be seen in there, turn things on and off, move the orders and adjust them, and then maybe disable the modify table from this review from your security settings to make sure that people don't just jump in there by accident and start rechanging things around to suit their preference, because again, it will actually change for everyone, and that's not what you want to happen. The last thing that I wanted to go through from a tips and trips perspective is the whole receipting process. So when you are receipting your items, if you haven't got the whole supplier invoice API integration turned on, I do recommend getting it turned on because it is a really handy way to help reduce administrative time. A bit of a caveat to that, before you do turn it on, is you really want to get your business processes set up to enable you to be able to capture anything that slips through the cracks. So what a lot of my customers prefer to do is still go by paper. They'll get the receipts or the invoices from the supplier. A lot of them still print it off, review it, stamp it, ready to process, hand it to the accounts team. They then go through the process of manually receipting everything off. If you are going to turn this on, you're going to lose that process because simPRO is just going to accept everything that comes in. So whatever hits the supplier portal, it's just going to upload it straight against that supplier purchase to basically treat it as gospel. There are little processes that you can set up to enable this to work while making sure that you're not being overcharged. That would be things like your price discrepancy reports. So you kind of do want to make sure that you've got your internal processes set up to ensure that you are reviewing what the suppliers are invoicing you before you do get this process up and running, to make sure that you aren't getting overcharged for items. So in setting it up, if you've never done it, you can go to utilities and import. Now, not all suppliers have the API integration set up. Some you will still have to manually import CSV files for. Under your supplier invoices over here, this is where we can go to start setting them up. So I'm going to go to MMEM because I know that the AWM group, they have this all set up anyway. So I'm going to go in there. Now, in here, this is where we're going to start setting it up. So what you are going to do is you're going to put in your user ID and your password. Once you've put those two fields in and you hit validate, simPRO is going to validate your login credentials with that supplier to make sure that it is valid credentials. You haven't accidentally mistyped your password or user ID or whatever it may be. Then it's going to start the process of importing. Generally, it will import once a day. It'll have a look towards the end of the day to have a look and say, okay, well, here's a whole bunch of POs that are sitting in our supplier portal. Now, does the PO number in our portal with this invoice, does that match the PO number inside of simPRO? So it'll do an API call back to simPRO and say, well, I've got an invoice sitting here. It's for PO 1234 with the invoice number being whatever. Here's all the parts that were purchased on it. If it does that API call and checks to make sure that they do match, it will then grab that invoice and then receipt that purchase order over in simPRO automatically for you, which can save you a huge amount of time. And it can also help start getting your catalog in, or it can start helping getting catalog items in because it will actually create the catalog items on the way through if they don't exist in the system. So if there's something that you bought that's one-off, or that just never was a part of your price file, it will actually start to create them on the way through, to ensure that your catalog matches everything that's happening inside of simPRO. Generally, it will just dump them in your catalog in an area that says no group, because it doesn't know the grouping conventions, which is usually that one at the top up here. What I usually recommend people do, so this doesn't get out of control, is actually go through and start reassigning these catalog items into the groups that they should actually live in. So that way they just become a part of your catalog moving forward with your up-to-date and correct buy prices. If you've never used a price discrepancy report before, under the reports, under view reports, it lives under suppliers and price discrepancies right here. So when we have a look at our price discrepancy report, we've got two different ways that we can run it. We can run the discrepancy based on the order price. So that's what you typed in to say you want to pay for it, to make sure that it is being receipted at that particular price. Or is it going to be receipted, are we looking at the discrepancy against what your catalog price is? So they will give you two different results. So you're going to have to be quite specific about which one you want to run the report on. So if I do that based on my catalog price, I'm not going to put in a date range. I'm just going to say, show me everything. It's then going to show me my discrepancies in the system. So this is saying for this particular product up here that I ordered back in 2016, this part number for that particular item, my catalog price says that I should have paid $8.38. However, my invoice price was for $7. I ordered 67 of them. So I had a discrepancy in my favor of $92. Obviously, anything that you want to double check is anything that's really red, because they're the ones that are bad. Anything that's red is a discrepancy out of your favor. You've paid more than what you should have been paying for them. This is also a really nice report to ensure that your pricing in your catalogs is current and up to date. So you can actually select these items. So I can tick that item. At the bottom of that list, I can then update my prices. So that will update my catalog price based on my last purchase price. So if there've been price rises or price reductions for particular parts and you want your catalog to be up to date with what those prices are, you will hit update prices. Strategically as a business, if you decide not to do that, that's absolutely fine. Some people won't do that because they don't want their catalog price to come down, because their markups are based on their buy price. So if your catalog prices drop and you're marking up off your buy price, then in theory, you could be making less money for those jobs. So strategically, some people will leave their catalog price at the higher value, knowing that they are being charged less than, because if we get charged $7, we're marking up off $8. In theory, we're going to be making more money on that part than what we would if it was at a $7 value. So that is up to you from a strategy perspective as to how you want the system to work from a markup perspective. Have a bit of a think about it, but it is a really nice way to ensure that you are keeping your catalog up to date if you do decide to then update the pricing in there. The other nifty little report I'm going to quickly go through before we start to wrap the session up is your top purchases report. So from a top purchases perspective, this report I usually say to go through to start organizing your catalogs or your favorites folder. What this will show you is this is going to give me a hit on my top 50 products based on the number of times that I've ordered those products. You can change it to the quantity that you've ordered. That can be a bit of a false economy because you might have had a project that you've ordered one random item for a lot of, because the tender requires you need a specific type of light to be able to install. So that could be a bit of a false economy. I find number of times ordered is a better way to do it because it is showing how many times you are ordering particular products. From here, what you can do is you can go to the bottom of the list, you can select those items and move them to your favorites folder. So it's a really nice way to get your favorites folder up to date based on the items that you're purchasing a lot of. The favorites folder is extremely important to manage your day-to-day catalog, because that's where you're going to be able to search for particular items and say, right, I want to look for my PowerPoint. I want to look for my GPO. So I want to look for my 2025 WE. Now, when I'm doing a search, it's going to search everything. However, if I tick this box, it's only going to show me the favorites that are in here. So there it is right there. So if you've got variants of this particular product and you are trying to find them, making sure that they are marked as favorites is a really, really handy way to manage this process. So you kind of look at your favorites folder as your day-to-day catalog, the stuff that you're buying or selling a lot of, your hot moving items. Everything else really should just be the catalog items that are in the system that are there just in case you need to use them. So more of your projects kind of products that you're not going to use a lot of. However, you need them in there in case you need to quote for them. So using that top purchase report is a really nice way to get your favorites folder up to scratch really quickly and really efficiently and effectively. Cool. All right. I think I've jammed a lot of content into that 45-minute session. So I'm going to probably wrap it up at that stage. This session I have recorded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this recording as well. I'll probably send out everyone a link to be able to download it if you wanted to go back through those tips and tricks. I know I've kind of moved a little bit fast just because I wanted to jam in the content. So if you do want to go back to that recording and see how I might have done particular things, I'll send out that recording to everyone that registered for this webinar. I do thank you all for attending. It's been great to see so many people attend. These free sessions are something that I'm probably going to look at start doing in conjunction with my paid sessions. I kind of wanted to give everyone a bit of a taste in terms of the sort of content you could expect in the paid sessions. So if you are interested in any of the paid sessions, I do have one coming up next week, which is going to be a service end-to-end workflow, which is going to be running Friday next week. I'm doing that in conjunction with my mates here at the brewery that I'm working out of. So anyone that does register for that session, to try and help these guys out, I'm going to include a free 4-pack of beer to be posted out to your workplace or wherever you want it posted to. So you guys can taste the delicious beer that I've had the privilege of drinking over the last week and a half, because it's pretty bloody good. So yeah, so again, I'm going to thank everyone for attending. If anyone has any questions, or if you want to unmute yourself just to have a bit of a chat, I'm happy to hang around for a little bit longer, just to go through any questions in relation to the whole purchasing, or if you had any feedback that you wanted to yell out, I'd be more than happy to hear it as well. So I'm going to open it up to you guys now to open up and have a bit of a chat, if you want to, of course. Could you do a linked item for freight parts number, and then it would always calculate the freight component, or do you need to remember the freight costs? Okay, so good question, mate. In terms of the freight, generally I usually just have a catalog item set up for the freight. It is a bit tricky because the freight costs can be completely different for everyone. It would be a bit painful to link the item for freight to particular part numbers, just because it's something that you need to manually do one by one. It's not too easy to do. I mean, I'd probably make sure that it is marked as a catalog item for non-inventory as well. So that way you don't get your stock locations just sitting there clogged up with all the freight items. Most people would just have freight in there as a non-inventory catalog item, add it to the purchase order, and then go through and just manually add the freight costs in. Or as you're getting the receipt back from the supplier, when you're receiving the freight, you can then just update the freight costs against that item, or just add it in that little freight component within the invoice. No worries, buddy. It looks like I've missed a few chats throughout here, just because this chat box wouldn't actually pop up. Carl did say, can you have two supplier items of one for 100 meters and 200 meters for the same supplier? Not really, man. I mean, it kind of, you can only have one minimum pack quantity against an item. So you probably need to have two different items there, which could be a bit of a pain in the ass because you're then going to have two different stock items for really the same product. So it's not really. Carl's also asked from a refrigerant perspective, that particular, let me just read that again. So we have refrigerant type of the R407C. We can order it in quantities of 10, 20, 65, etc. from each supplier. When purchased, I'd like this order go to the one stock item so I can be booked out. Is this possible? Again, not really, man, because you can only really have one minimum pack quantity and one supply quantity. Unfortunately, if you do have it like that, they're probably going to have to be different items. There is one other way that you can possibly do it is with the trade split price. That's really only going to work for one of them. So the trade split price is designed for buying price breaks. So if you had it set up for, say, 65 kegs, you said if I ordered over a certain amount, I then get it at a cheaper price for 20 kegs. That will work from that perspective, but it's not going to let you go any further down than just that one item. It's really going to be you're buying 65 kg at this price or 10 at this price. Ashley said, we use Xero as accounts. We receipt the order through simPRO. Once we import the invoice to Xero, it does not automatically post to the right group. Xero has set up a service domestic. How do we set up simPRO to go to the right group in Xero? Really good question that I can answer for you. That's a pretty easy fix there, Ashley. I can't show you in my training build because I've actually got inventory tracking turned on. Let me just double check a colleague's build just to see whether they have it. And I'll have a quick look and I'll show you how that works. So when we are receipting the item, so let's go to this one here, create a receipt. Okay, so when we're creating a receipt for the item, see in here how it says cost center? This cost center is saying aluminium cutting. Now, this cost center is not where the cost is going to inside the job. It's where we're posting it to within your accounting package. So if you want to, if you said, okay, well, this bag of cement, I don't want to receipt that to my 5-0011, for example. I want it to go to 5-1000. I can actually hit that cost center in there and then change where I'm receipting that item to in terms of my accounting package. So to redirect costs into Xero, it's going to be a matter of you jumping in this cost center and just redirecting the costs as to which cogs you want it to go to inside of Xero. That's probably going to be the easiest way for you to manage that. Does that make sense there, Ashley? Yes? Okay, cool. Peter, you can create two part numbers for the same item with Dash. Yes, you can. You can create different part numbers for it. I mean, you can only link the supplier to it once. So unfortunately, once that supplier is linked in, that's it for that supplier. So that's a bit of a shame. I mean, you could, in theory, have multiple suppliers. You could create the same supplier multiple times. I don't like that process because that means that when it's going across the Xero, it's pushing to two different suppliers for your payables, which makes it a little bit of a pain in the ass to manage over in your accounting package. So I generally wouldn't go down that process, but if you were desperate to, that could be something that you could do. I'm just going to quickly scroll through this just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Thank you for All right, cool. Doesn't look like there's any other questions in here. So if you've got any other that I haven't answered, so if you do have any other questions, please feel free to chuck them in. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll wrap the session up. I'll save the recording and upload it, and I'll send out everyone a link to be able to get it. Cool. So thanks again for your attendance. Like I said, if you are interested in that service webinar, I'm happy to send out everyone a link to be able to subscribe to it. It is 100 plus GST for it. It'll probably go for close to 2 hours. So you'll get a lot of really good content for not a lot of cost, and you'll be helping support me as well as my mate at Bonehead Brewing. So that would be awesome. Thanks for your time. And yep, for the next webinar, I'll send out some links when I decide what the next session is going to be. If anyone wants to email me through with any ideas on any sharp webinars you'd like to see happen in the future, I'm more than happy to take your feedback on board as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and that would be awesome. So take care, and we'll chat again soon.